Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Marshall webinar, The Future of Entertainment. Towards the end of our discussion, we will hold a Q&A session, and please feel free to submit your questions at any time during this webinar using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. With that said, I'd like to introduce S. Mark Young, who holds the George Bozanic and is also a professor of accounting at Leventhal. In addition, Professor Young is a New York Times bestselling author for his book, The Mirror Effect: How Celebrity Narcissism is Seducing America. Mark?
Thank you very much, Sujeen. Welcome everyone to our webinar. I will be moderating today's session, and for about the first 45 minutes or so, I will pose questions to our panelists. This will be an interactive discussion, so even though a question might be posed to one person, I'm hoping that everyone will voice their opinions. After that, we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes of Q&A. Some questions have already been submitted by attendees, but please feel free to ask questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can. Today, I'm delighted that we have been able to enlist three outstanding panelists: Josh Grode from Legendary Entertainment, Elaine Paul from Amazon Studios, and John Nendick, founder of Malagna Consulting and former Deputy Global Leader for Media and Entertainment at Ernst & Young Consulting. They will provide their perspectives on the state of affairs of the entertainment industry. Because each panelist's resume is extensive, I have picked out a few things that you might find interesting. Let's begin with Josh. Joshua B. Grode is the CEO of Legendary Entertainment, a leading studio company based in Burbank, California. Legendary creates film, television, digital, and comic content that is distributed globally. Mr. Grode previously held the title of partner at the LA office of Urel and Manella LLP, and I was chair of the firm's transactions practice, where he focused on mergers and acquisitions, equity and debt financing, including structured debt financing, day-to-day governance, corporate governance matters, and transactions involving intellectual property across a wide range of industries. Throughout his 25-year-plus career, Mr. Grode regularly facilitated film, TV, and video game financing and mergers and acquisitions, including representing and advising Daliel Wanda Group Corporation Limited in the $3.5 billion purchase of Legendary Entertainment. Mr. Grode sits on the board of directors of the Special Olympics of Southern California and the Los Angeles Police Foundation, and is chair of the Board of Counselors at USC School of Dramatic Arts. He holds a BA from UCLA and a JD from Loyola Law School. Elaine Paul serves as CFO and VP of Finance for Amazon Studios. In this role, Elaine oversees portfolio and financial planning for Amazon's global slate of original film and television programming, as well as studio operations. Her team includes data science, strategy, business intelligence, and advanced analytics, in addition to content planning and analysis and production finance. Prior to joining Amazon, Elaine served as CFO of Hulu for 6 years, during a time of pivotal change and disruption in the industry. Before Hulu, Elaine worked at the Walt Disney Company for 19 years, most recently as SVP of Corporate Strategy, Business Development, and Technology, where she led various acquisitions, new business initiatives, and strategy investments domestically and internationally. Prior to her time at Disney, Elaine worked as an associate at McKinsey & Company and a financial analyst at Morgan Stanley. Elaine holds an MBA from the Harvard Business School and a BA in economics and history with distinction from Stanford. I wanted to go back to Mr. Grode for a minute just to say a fun fact about him. Apart from collecting vintage watches, Josh is really an old school purist when it comes to listing Star Wars and the original Star Trek TV series as his favorites. Fun fact about Elaine is that she was the TV show host for Stanford University's version of The Dating Game, broadcast on the university's closed caption TV station. Now, I've known Elaine for about 8-9 years, never heard about that before. But most intriguing is that Elaine, who hails from Oklahoma, has attended greased pig chasing contests. And yes, that is exactly the way it sounds. Maybe she can tell us a little bit about that as we go on. John Dendick is an expert in new business models and innovative and disruptive businesses. As one of Ernst & Young's most senior partners and deputy global leader of its fast-growing technology, media, and telecom $5 billion global business, this business focuses on how technological developments, cloud, AI, RPA, 5G, cyber, blockchain, etc., are affecting business and enabling disruption by empowering consumers. John has served as lead or advisory partner on top global clients, including Netflix, Quibi, Disney, Fox, Hilton, House of Blues, News Corporation, Liberty Media, etc. In June 2020, he retired from Ernst & Young. His current activities focus on his company, Malaga Consulting, and he serves on a number of boards and committees. Fun fact about John, if he seems recognizable to you, it may be because you have seen him as the face of Ernst & Young for 15 years, who delivered the winning envelopes, in parentheses without issue, according to him, to the presenters of the globally televised annual Golden Globes, Emmys, and American Music Awards. John is a semi-retired, semi-professional rugby player, marathoner and triathlete, and an enthusiastic golfer. Now, for those of you who are really YouTube aficionados, you may recall in 2012, Big Bang Theory did a skit for the Emmys where they referred to John Dendick as John the Human Spreadsheet Dendick. So with those introductions, I'd like to begin and ask about the general effect of COVID-19. And John, let me start with you. You know, when you look at the trends of entertainment consumption since the start of the pandemic, how much of this is pandemic related and temporary, and how much of this is the new normal?
Thanks, Mark, and happy to be here with my two esteemed panelists today. I think to answer that question, in general, what we're seeing in the pandemic demand and supply is really just what we see on an ongoing basis, but accelerated. That is that consumers are in the driver's seat, enabled by technology about what they want to consume. So I'm just going to comment on a couple of segments where I think there's been some tailwinds during the pandemic, video streaming and video games, and a couple of segments, live entertainment and sports, where there's maybe been some headwinds, and talk about how temporary or permanent they may be. So first of all, from a streaming, this is clearly the biggest business in entertainment pre-pandemic and post, whether you call it OTT, VOD, internet television, direct to consumer. It has been and continues to be the big growth engine. And we have seen significant acceleration during the last 6 months. If you look at Netflix, it gained 26 million new subscribers in its second calendar quarter in a 3-month period that was about the size of its full 2019 subscriber growth. If you look at Disney with its Disney Plus new offering, in less than a year, it's generated 73 million new paid subscribers, which is way ahead of its plans. And as I think we'll discuss later, there are several other new entrants to the streaming game, whether it's Peacock, HBO Max, and the big tech companies like Elaine's company and Apple are also participants. So what this means, that is a tailwind in and of itself in terms of subscriber growth. It also means it's a great time to be in the video production business. It's the golden age of video production, because not only do we have significant ongoing demand from the traditional media companies, studios, and independents for original content to the tune of, I think it was about $89 billion in 2019, there's also significant new demand from the OTT streamers and players to the tune of about 39 billion, or about a 35% uplift in demand. And so the demand for video content on an ongoing basis will be significant and a great growth opportunity for the industry. The asterisk to that, which I think we'll probably talk about too, is while there's great demand for video content, the pandemic has resulted in a slowdown of the ability to supply that. But from an ongoing trend, I expect the demand to remain strong. Moving on to video gaming, gaming remains one of the least expensive forms of consumer entertainment, and it has significant potential to capture a greater share of discretionary spend, especially when you look at the cloud gaming side, which provides access to any game, anywhere, on any device. That's the major new platform. There's some great new games being developed for gaming. There's some great new platforms. Look at taking a geographic view. The largest gaming company by revenue in the world is Tencent, that's based in China. And it reached record daily active users earlier this year for its top 2 games, when there was over 200 million daily active users for those games during what to them was the early phases of COVID. And maybe as a proxy for future trends, the daily active users, or DAUs, for Tencent, once China has moved a little bit back to post-COVID normal, those daily active users actually declined as people went back to work. But what we've seen is the time spent on gaming has remained higher than pre-COVID. So essentially, there's a new normal here driven by the players who have become emotionally and financially invested in the games and enjoying the social element, and it's mobile enabled. So those are the 2 uplifts. I would say on the headwinds categories, live entertainment. Obviously, live entertainment is generally with the absence of sports, but entertainment, concerts, music, and the like is essentially shut down. And the public health being the primary issue and consumer confidence being the secondary issue, other reasons behind this. And so until there is something that enables there to be at least national, if not global, consistent health improvements and a vaccine, then music artists aren't going to consider doing a tour. When something's allowable in one place but not in another, it just makes planning that kind of activity impossible. And one thing the people in the tour business will say is, until you can really get resumption of a regular live event, you'll need to have 100% of the people in the capacity. You can't have 1 in 6 seats. So what the business thinks is that maybe Q3 or Q4 of 2021, there could be a resumption of normal activities, pending successful vaccine. And maybe by 2022, there'll be back to 2018, 2019 levels. The good thing that the people I talk to in that space feel, and I, as a consumer of one, I would endorse this, is it's not like the consumer demand has gone away for this. And so artists are looking forward to the opportunity to tour again, because that's what they do and love. And we as consumers are looking forward to the opportunity of viewing that enjoyable content. So hopefully that is a temporary versus a permanent change. The last one I'll touch on is live sports. And as we've seen, live sports has kind of limped back to business to different degrees, depending on the sport. You have some sports like maybe golf and car racing, Formula One, that happen to be designed in a socially distanced way. And so it's easier to conduct the sport. Tennis might be another. Then on the other extreme, you have football that has a large number of players spending a lot of time very close together. And so we're seeing that issue in the NFL. The economic side of it is, sports get a lot of its revenue from the in-arena, in-game, in-stadium fan experience, but also gets a higher chunk of its revenue, again, depending on the sport, from the broadcast. So, with the resumption of sports, broadcast revenues and advertising have come back. There's been a bit of a debate as to whether the demand for sports has gone down, because if you look at any of the big sporting events that have been broadcast for the last few months, from the NBA finals to the World Series of Baseball to the NFL games, they are all individually down in terms of their ratings compared to their prior year. But then if you look to the fact that they essentially have been condensed into a short period and are stacked on top of each other, the viewing in aggregate for broadcast sports has actually gone up. In the 3 months ended October, went up 7% versus the prior year. And so in aggregate, it seems that the demand is there, but on an individual sport basis, there's a bit of dilution or spreading of the audience. So I'll stop there, Mark.
Elaine and Josh, any comments?
That was pretty thorough. So thank you. I think the initial question was, how is COVID changing the face of entertainment? Is that fairly accurate?
Yes.
So look, I think that for I won't touch on sports or concert or touring, but from a very practical perspective, and we're partners with Amazon on a number of different shows, which is terrific, and they're terrific partners. We have collectively had to figure out how to produce content in a very challenging environment. We can build all the protections that we need around safety, and we've done that with Amazon and our other partners on productions that are happening now around the world. We have testing on a daily basis. We have health screenings. We recently invested in bracelet technology that will location track you down to the foot when you walk onto our sets, so that we can be highly accurate in contact tracing, especially given the fact that I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. So asking somebody who they were in proximity with over the past 48 hours is next to impossible. But now through technology, we're able to really pinpoint that, and as a result, reduce the number of people that we have to quarantine. But net, it's adding millions of dollars to every production in order to keep everybody safe. And safety is really the guiding principle for us and the partners that we have on our television shows. What we have witnessed across our library of films and for our new content is that the demand for content has never been higher. We've burned through the inventory that we built up pre-COVID. And I believe that the COVID effect is really an acceleration of probably 2 years of consumer adoption of streaming services. Whether or not everyone's going to adopt all the services, hard to say. I don't know that there's any definitive study yet on how many services people are going to become a subscriber to. You read some that say 3, some that say 5. But the one thing that's consistent is you deliver premium quality content onto a platform. And right now that content is being consumed at an amazing, amazing rate. And so when we look at the landscape, we look at, our partners like we have at Amazon, or Netflix, and we say, all right, how can we deliver compelling content to them? Because our content is what is driving their subscriber growth, not just ours, but compelling content is what's driving subscriber growth. And so the pressure on us to be back into the market to create it and to deliver it has never been greater, but also the opportunities have never been greater. And I think that, what also, we have to remember in the dynamic that's currently at play is that for at least my entire professional career, and I would venture to say Elaine and John as well, we've never had something the size of a global network. That never existed before, right? You'd have HBO, which was a very large domestic pay network that had 25 to 30 million paying subscribing households. And you inject a piece of content into a network of that size, and it has a finite ceiling on value just based on the size of the network. Well, if you have the same piece of content and you inject into a 180 million person network or 125 million person network, the content has a higher ceiling on value. So, the economics of our business are changing. The approach to the market of our business is changing. Consumer behavior, I don't know that it is changing as dramatically as we all believe it is changing right now, because we're in this kind of COVID bubble. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens toward the end of next year with respect to, theatrical exhibition, TVOD, EST, DVD, home entertainment, in addition to streaming. Right now, clearly the streaming platforms, because they are the most convenient, and since we're all at home, the most accessible, are growing exponentially. But I don't yet know. I'm not yet convinced that the theatrical experience is dead, as others may say. I actually think that there's a lot of life left in the theatrical experience, and with not science-based, but when you look at us as a species, we like to do things together. We're a communal species, and you go back to the days of the caveman sitting around the fire, and they loved it when, the caveman stood up or cavewoman stood up and told a great story about trying to be, not eaten by some kind of big scary monster, and they all were laughing and pointing, and, then they all went to bed. Telling stories now, putting them on the various networks around the world, or the global networks, is really an evolution of that. And going to a movie theater or as another shared communal experience is really an evolution of sitting around the campfire and hearing someone tell the story and having that shared experience. So I'm not sure that the shared experience of content consumption is going to go away the way some may predict.
Thank you. Elaine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's nice to be joined by such an accomplished set of colleagues. So nice to be here. Yeah, it's been very interesting to be in the front seat during COVID at a major streaming platform. So COVID for us has, without sounding, has been an accelerant of consumer behavior. And I think Josh said it, that probably things that may have taken 2+ years to happen have really been accelerated by COVID in terms of consumer behavior. Cutting the cord, the theatrical experience, getting more comfortable with streamed entertainment and streaming more at home. And so for us, we have a global business. Prime Video is a part of a multi-benefit subscription with the Prime subscription globally. We're in 200 countries worldwide. And what we saw with COVID is a step change in our business fundamentals, really, both in terms of number of streaming subscribers and in terms of the engagement of those subscribers. So that's been sort of the reality for our business fundamentals. A publicly released statistic is, it's rather old now, but Amazon did announce that we had 150 million Prime subscribers worldwide. That was an announcement some time ago. So to the point about global networks, yeah, the scale of these streaming platforms is really unprecedented in terms of if you think about it as a single outlet for creators and for content to reach customers worldwide. We've also seen a step change in some of the business models and windowing. And theatrical release window, of course, is probably the most obvious that's been impacted with largely the closure of theaters, and with studios embracing a model that they probably would not have embraced were it not for the shutdown of theaters, to release films direct to streaming platforms. And that happened by necessity at first, and maybe establishing a bit of a new norm. So for Amazon particularly, we had great success with My Spy came onto our platform as an original film, debuted on Amazon Prime. Then that was followed by Borat, which was a really big success for us and timely with cultural relevance. And we've announced Eddie Murphy's Coming to America will also be debuting and premiering on Amazon Prime worldwide. So seeing that sort of change in theatrical windowing and embracing an opportunity to go for movies to debut on streaming platforms, as well as a PVOD model. So Amazon Prime, in addition to our SVOD, we have transaction video on demand and channels as well. And Trolls, for example, came and it really introduced the premium video on demand model. And we saw that as a big success on Amazon Prime, with people having the opportunity to pay a premium to get it in the traditional sell-through window, if you will, but accelerated, pay a premium to get it much accelerated. So we've seen the acceleration of all sorts of changes to distribution models, to the business models with the addition of PVOD, to the business models with the start on a streaming platform first and skip the theatrical window altogether. And outside of just movies, of course, the fundamentals of streaming TV, I think that this COVID presented like that step change accelerant. Other things in terms of COVID, of course, it's been super disruptive to production and has increased cost and put a stop on things for a matter of months. And we are all getting back to what's the new norm of how we produce in COVID environments. And Josh spoke to that and what that's required in terms of massive change in terms of just the operations of production and the safety protocols and building plans that can be flexible, knowing that production could get shut down for a week or two if there's an incident, and planning things differently as a result. So I'll stop there.
Elaine, let me just follow up quickly on this. Are you guys trying to garner more international content as a result of the issues with domestic production?
It's not an issue with domestic production. COVID has presented an issue for global production. And the extent of that, of course, is on a country by country basis. But from the fundamentals of we're now producing in a COVID environment, and that requires safety protocols and also, is subject to getting shut down or new restrictions or whatever zone, whatever jurisdiction, and whatever COVID, code red, green, or blue any particular country is in, we have to be flexible for our global production. We produce in 16 countries globally, and so it's impacted us across the globe. What, not related to COVID, but in terms of international content, not to supplant quote unquote domestic content for our domestic subscribers, but a super important thing in running a global streaming service is local content is extremely important to having a service that resonates with the local customers in India, in the UK, in Germany, in Brazil. And so we've seen a big expansion, or we proactively pursued a big expansion in our what we call our local production efforts, where we'll produce original programming out of the UK, out of Germany, out of Brazil, out of India, out of Japan. And that's super important to growing and building a healthy and thriving service in each individual local market. And just an interesting thing to know from the Amazon perspective, I think domestically, we often think of, customers often think of Amazon Prime as shipping. And then now we're increasingly training customers to know that we have incredible streaming video content as part of that offering with Jack Ryan and First Run Films and The Boys and et cetera. Internationally, in some of the developing markets, video is actually the lead for Amazon Prime. And then commerce comes on the back of that. So video is a super strategic part of the multi-benefit subscription offer that Prime offers around the world. And in international markets is often sometimes the lead for that. So local international content is incredibly important in our global, business development.
Great, thank you. Let me switch gears for a moment now and talk about something that you've already touched on, which is exhibition window shrinkage and its implications. Yesterday, Warner Media announced that all 17 of its 2021 films will be shown on HBO Max on the same day that they come out in theaters. And I'm wondering if you could give us your thoughts, Josh?
Well, we're right in the middle of that with two huge movies on that slate. It is still a very fluid situation. Nothing has been finalized with respect to when the movies are going or how they're going or if they're going. And in just scrolling through some of the Q&A, I mean, there's a lot of questions on the topic of windowing. So let me just spend a moment to discuss that. So by way of background, the traditional window business before the COVID started was you would have a movie come out in theaters, and then roughly 72 to 90 days later, you would have a window where you would be able to get that movie on home entertainment. So that's DVD, TVOD, or EST. TVOD is transactional video on demand. EST is purchasing, electronic sell-through. Roughly 4 months later, you'd start to see it on your pay TV platform, which now also includes the streaming platforms. It'd be there for a while. Then you'd have a free TV window. Then you'd hopscotch between pay TV, free TV, pay TV, free TV, and that kind of patchwork lays out across the globe in a country by country basis. And it was a very lucrative model for a very long time because you effectively had 4 ways to monetize the same piece of content: theatrically, home entertainment, pay television, free television. With COVID, and even before COVID, the pressure on theatrical was mounting because you had high marketing costs, you had high production costs, and the tails for those windows that I just described were starting to shrink. We've seen that with every studio. When I was lawyering, I did most of the financings for all the studios, so I saw their data. And we've seen it in recent box office performance pre-COVID. The historical problem was that the exhibitors, AMCs, the Cinemarks of the world, refused to shorten that theatrical window and said, if you want to eat into my theatrical window of 72 to 90 days, I'm not going to carry your movie. Well, COVID all of a sudden turned that on its head and changed the leverage 100% to the studios, saying, I have a $200+ million investment in a whole raft of movies. I need to monetize it, or 100 million, or whatever the number is. I need to get it out. You cannot stand in my way. And the exhibitors had an existential question, which is, are we still relevant in the food chain? So historically, you had somewhat of an alignment of interest between exhibition and distribution. Now you didn't really have an alignment. You had existential and monetary. And as a result, you started to see the changing of windows under the guise of temporary during COVID. The problem with potential problem with things like day and date on a post-COVID basis is that the economic model for exhibition, if you lost roughly 7% of your box office, most of the exhibitors would go bankrupt. That's, in terms of a margin basis. And so, you can imagine what's going to happen, because the exhibition has 2 levers to play with. They have exclusivity, right? Well, actually 3: exclusivity, ticket price, and settlement rate, right? Well, they can't raise the ticket price much higher than it is, because all of a sudden it doesn't become an entertainment value proposition that's worth engaging in. They are going to lose the windowing fight, because at the end of the day, the whole structure of the downstream rights is undermining the value up front. So it becomes down to settlement rate. Settlement rate is the split between the studio and the exhibitor as to how much they get of the ticket. A big movie, a Dune, Godzilla vs. Kong, something like that, we're at probably a 60% plus, meaning we get 60% of the ticket price. The exhibitor, the movie chain, takes 40%. The economics to make it work in a new world where you're having a shrinking and you're losing attendance, it's going to be like 80-20 in favor of the exhibitor. which means that you're not going to get any money out of exhibition, which means you're not going to invest in marketing the movie, which means the whole system starts to shake a little bit and potentially starts to fall apart. So I don't yet know, because we're just too early, and we're too early in all of it, how it's going to shake out once COVID gets out of the way. During the COVID moment, whether that is lockdown or immediately after we start to come out, and we have a return back into the marketplace, there's going to be a different economic model that's going to put a lot of pressure, on exhibition. And we're going to be more reliant on the other revenue streams, which means film could start to look a lot like television in terms of getting a paid TV platform to pay a big license fee to get the rights. But on a permanent basis, I don't yet know how that's going to shake out. Rule of thumb, by the way, is about 80% of your box office is generated within the first 17 days of exhibition. So, you're going to see on a permanent basis a shorter window. It's not going to be 72 days. It's not going to be 90 days. Will it be day and date? Not sure. Will it be 17 days? Will it be 31 days? I think we're going to have something that's actually going to be dynamic windowing, which I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, which is going to be based on the performance of the movie in the theater. We will have a window that will expand and contract. And for those of us who are now doing new output deals with streamers, it will be something like, if we pull it off and give it to you earlier, we get paid X. If we pull it off and give it to you later, we get paid X minus some number to properly value the rights. So it's a dynamic time. The great part that underlies all of this, though, which is not lost on me, and I know it's not lost on my other panelists, is that we're in a business and we're making a product that people want. Not a lot of industries are in that business right now. So, we're the product we make is wanted around the world. So, really the question for us is working with exhibition in partnership, working with the paid television, which now, as I said, includes the streaming platforms, in partnership to figure out what is the model that makes the most economic sense to be able to continue to create great compelling content.
Thank you. John, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's interesting because the theatrical exhibition process is as Josh says, it's very much of a shared experience. It's a communal experience. It's not live. It's just watching a film, recorded film on a bigger screen, but it's the experience of viewing it is a lot different than sitting in your living room, watching TV. And so I think if you're looking at consumer demand in a post-pandemic world, there will be demand for that, especially for, young people want to get out of the house, want some separation. It's a social experience, maybe, compared to, going out for dinner, as opposed to deciding if you want to watch content in your living room or with a bunch of strangers, on a bigger screen. So I think there is some strategic demand that stays there for that. To me, the question is, you kind of have today. You have three participants in groups in this ecosystem or discussion. You have the exhibitors or the theater chains, as Josh described, who would like as much exclusivity as they can. Essentially, they spend big capital investments on their facilities. They have great projectors, big screens, nice comfortable chairs. They provide food and beverage, and they're in big malls, they're anchor tenants. It creates a lot of pedestrian traffic that everybody likes. So that's so they like that. They, as Josh said, they probably on average pay about half of the ticket price to the film producer, but they keep 100% of the food and beverage revenue that they get to charge while people are there. So they're looking to preserve that. Then if you have the pure production business, pure play, it's looking just to maximize, as Josh described, what its revenues are, and traditionally that maximization has been driven off an initial theatrical release. The third sort of category I think you have now that is a bit different in terms of its economics is you have the film production business that is in a vertically integrated business that also owns a streaming business, and so that business is looking to obviously maximize the revenue from its individual film, but it's also looking to maximize the value of its entire business that to a large part might be driven on growth in streaming subscribers. So if you look at, this year, for example, Disney as a company has lost about $8 to $9 billion because of its problems in the theme park business that we all know have been closed, but because its subscription business of Disney Plus has grown better than planned, its stock is up this year. So, some of these big vertically integrated media companies are analyzing, how much value this film is to their streaming service in terms of either new subscribers, reducing churn, value versus going through a traditional model. So I think that's a different dynamic that we're seeing that coincides with the pandemic.
Elaine, I want to ask you something related, but a little bit different. So COVID, it seemed like the SVOD market was getting very, very crowded. And, Queen came in, unfortunately didn't last very long. Now, with such demand for content, what is your prognosis for the SVOD market? Will more people enter? Will companies be leaving?
Well, it's interesting. The domestic environment currently, there's been a huge influx of additional competition, if you will. So Netflix, well-established player globally, Amazon, a close number 2 currently globally. Disney, of course, came in very strong domestically, and I think we could all expect to see its global growth to be successful. The rest of the competition currently, and I'm oversimplifying, of course, has largely been domestic. So HBO Max, it's been covered that they're probably a bit disappointed with their subscriber traction to date, and it's been largely it's a domestic play now, but they do have the opportunity to create an international footprint, and I'm certain they will be successful in growing. It's very interesting what they're doing with the movies, starting with Wonder Woman, and then others are jumping in the fray. So there's been coverage in the last week of Discovery's entrance into it, and everybody is trying to find their direct-to-consumer play if they don't already have one. Peacock took a slightly different approach with an ad-supported model in addition to what they offer the Comcast subscribers. So long way of saying, I think my personal view is the domestic market will probably shake out and rationalize a little bit. And globally, I think it's very hard to establish a global platform. It's expensive. The technology is by no means simple to be able to get your streaming video app and content, on all devices across all technologies with local language, local currency capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So that's expensive. It's a high fixed cost business. SVOD is a high fixed cost business, and it's all about leverage and scale. So I do think it's going to be challenging for these later entrants that have perhaps a more niche and specialized content offering to go global. And then in terms of what they can do domestically, it will be interesting to see what shakes out. And is it a series of multiple offerings for which customers pull out their wallets for subscription after subscription after subscription? Or do things rationalize with some aggregated plays and different business and economic models that we're already seeing in the marketplace? So it's early days, but I think the good news is it is early days, and all the macro fundamentals, there are a ton of tailwinds supporting the fundamentals of direct-to-consumer and SVOD that bode well domestically and globally.
Thank you. Amazingly, time is running fast here. So I wanted to just turn to some questions. Josh, I asked you, you mentioned about June 2021 and Godzilla versus Kong. Can you tell us just a little bit about those films? Because I'm really excited about them.
Well, a lot to be excited. I've seen both. And for those of you that are Dune fans, the movie over-delivers. Incredibly talented director and an amazing cast. And Godzilla vs. Kong, the great thing about that movie is I just got to say the title and everybody kind of gets excited and knows what it is. But you know, the one thing I will say about that, and I also will say about some of the projects that we're doing, some of them are with, you know, Amazon, is and it kind of goes back to the topic we were just talking about. You have a growth in people trying to stand up streaming platforms, people who shouldn't be standing up streaming platforms, right? You have like Lionsgate Stars trying to become a streaming platform. MGM owns Epix, they're trying to become a streaming platform. Everybody's trying to launch a streaming platform, some advertising supported, some subscription supported. But the one thing that is a systemic shift in streaming is that historically on cable, we had to buy the channel in order to potentially get a show, right? So if I wanted to watch Vikings, which is now coming to Amazon, which I'm very excited about, but if I wanted to watch Vikings, I had to be a History Channel subscriber, put aside whether it was an authenticated video on demand experience, but I had to be a subscriber to DirecTV or Comcast to get the channel. So I was making my buying decisions based on channel. And in an OTT world, you're able, or should be able to make your buying decision based on show. So when I'm looking around, I want to say, oh, I like that show. I want to watch that show when I want to watch it. I don't have to watch the channel or buy the channel. And what's happening is everybody is rushing in to build their OTT platform. The landscape's going to look a lot like cable, which is you're going to have a proliferation of channels, which take out the word channel, put in OTT platform, right? You know, Amazon, Netflix, Discovery, Stars, Epix, et cetera, they're channels. And on the channel will be great content. So what I really believe at the end of the day, you know, putting aside structural problems, which I don't think there's going to be a lot of structural problems, meaning like just your streaming technology doesn't work, things like that. At the end of the day, the winners are going to be determined based on who has great content. If you have terrible content, you're not going to win. If you have great content, you're going to win. And you know, I look at our company. We're in the business of supplying. We're supplying great content to whoever wants to buy the content. We're not going to build a streaming platform, and it's finding the channel or the streaming platform that looks and values your content the right way to then say that's a great home for this. So let's partner. And you know, without calling out Elaine too much here, you know, we have a show with them that's been announced called Paper Girls, which is an amazing show based on a Brian K. Vaughan comic book about young girls who actually have paper routes who get caught in a war between two different groups involved in time travel. So it's a great show. It's female empowerment. It's everything you want in a television show. It's diverse, right, which is terrific. And the content, if we do our job right in partnership with Amazon, it will be a great piece of content. That's what drives success, right? There's a lot of ways you can consume it, but you got to have the thing to consume.
Thank you. Elaine, I wanted to ask you a similar question. You've got two original series coming out among many called, one is The Sound of Metal and the other is The Wilds. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, Sound of Metal is a movie, and that is, I would put it in the category of an interesting prestige film. And The Wilds is a series that we call targeted towards our young adult audience. And a big opportunity that we see in terms of further delighting and serving customers is to delight and serve the young adult and African-American audiences, particularly. Josh alluded to diversity, he alluded to female empowerment. And that's something we're very focused on as we look at our go forward slate of product, is creating products that will particularly draw in young adult audiences, diverse audiences, et cetera. And the Wilds, we are super, super excited about for its potential with the young adult audiences. I have 3 teenagers, and I'm excited about it, and my daughter is excited about it. So I encourage you all to check out the trailer for the Wilds.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to turn to some of the questions. We've gotten a ton of questions here, and we have a huge Marshall student representation. So let me start with a number of questions that have come up. The first question is, how can Marshall students best prepare themselves to be competitive in the world of the entertainment business? We have lots of different classes, within the Marshall School and in collaboration with the Cinematic Arts School as well. So, what kind of classes should they be taking? What kind of majors should they be following? Your thoughts. John, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've said, and this was a pre-COVID question, and I have 3 grown kids, and none of them did this. But if I was advising someone to go what to study in college today, it would be a dual major in IT, technology, and Mandarin, because I think those are really the 2 languages of the future. As we're moving into a digital world. We're in the digital world, and I think a lot of what we've been talking about today will mean that those technology skills will be more highly rated. And so in terms of the sectors, I think I mentioned these, gaming and film production, and for a period of time the streaming channels are going to be growing at huge rates, and they're going to have a high demand for great students. And I'm sure Marshall will have a lot of those candidates as good picks.
Thank you. Josh, any advice?
Well, I would say if there's tax classes, take some tax classes, because a lot of decision making is driven by tax mitigation and tax credit strategy. Elaine alluded to filming around the world. We're filming around the world. We hunt out jurisdictions that have the best soft money benefits through tax rebates and highly complicated structuring. So from a business perspective, understanding tax, understanding international tax is vital for the finance side of our business. From an operational side, I guess the best advice I would say is get your feet wet, get in there, get into the pool, right? Go get a PA job, go get any job in the business to start building your relationships. The one thing, and I've said this to some other students, we have a very robust internship program at Legendary, and we make content. Elaine makes content that travels around the world, but our business is actually really small, right? Everybody kind of knows everybody, right? And so, a woman who works with Elaine, Jen Salke, I've known since high school, right? It's the nature of this industry. And I encourage everybody to think of themselves who are going into this or want to go into this business as, don't think of yourself as wanting to go into it. Think of yourselves, once you've started to take classes in this that'll lead toward a career in this space, you need to think of yourself as that you are already in it. And now you've just started the process of moving up the ladder. And so get your feet wet, get any job you can. It doesn't matter what it is, get out there and build your network. The one great thing, and I've said this before on other panels, about participating in a panel like this if you're a student, is that now indirectly, you now are part of my network, Elaine's network, and John's network, right? That's pretty special. That's amazing. That's an amazing benefit that Marshall has given you all. Don't squander it.
Thank you. Elaine?
Great answers from both of you. So looking at it from the business and finance perspective, a major change that I've seen since I entered the workforce is I would encourage is data and advanced analytics, and particularly in these direct to consumer businesses, there is a wealth of data that, when analyzed properly, and can add immense insight into the value of a customer, insight into the potential value of content, insight into how much one should pay to acquire a particular customer, insight into marketing effectiveness, and I could go on and on and on. And what I've realized is that the ability to get that data and analyze it often surpasses the average analytics of an average MBA. And so I think getting skills in data science and advanced analytics is incredibly important, and is super valuable in the marketplace today. And I would give my now teen children advice if they were pursuing a business career and ultimately thinking about graduate school. I would be encouraging, yes, take the traditional business classes and understand that, but absolutely get a tech, data, and statistics, advanced analytics courses and things to sort of complement that, if not be the focus. So I'd see like an MBA data science as just an incredibly marketable set of skills.
Thank you. I want to go back to something that John mentioned, which is the role of China. And John, I'm wondering, can you expand on this issue, seeing that you thought that one of the most important things that students could take would be to take courses on Mandarin?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'd be interested in Josh and Elaine's views also. I mean, China is clearly along with India, is a huge market measured by population, measured by upward opportunity. It has some huge strengths in terms of it being technologically advanced, focused on gaming with Tencent, Alibaba, and the like. It was for a period of time very outwardly focused on investing in the US, as Josh knows firsthand. That has been pulled back, whether temporarily or beyond. But whether you look at China as a market for for customer content, if you do, it's huge. If you look at it as a partner for supplying content, whether it's gaming or similar business, there's great skills there. And I think, even though US-China relations aren't probably at an all-time high, I'm guessing that will improve over time, and things will come close together again. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Josh, Elaine, any thoughts?
Well, we have an office in China. We operate there quite extensively. The China market as a box office this year surpassed the US, although obviously this is an outlier year. I think it probably will wind up surpassing the US, next year as well. The China market is really a two-window market. You have theatrical, then you have platform, and that's all the monetization that you have there. And in some ways, it makes it a lot easier because you're throwing, the marketing resources into a theatrical opening. There are curbs on what you can spend theatrically to market your movie there. The government tells you when you can start marketing. The government tells you when you can go into the theater, and the government tells you when you come out of the theater. So you still really have to play by the rules there, which is somewhat challenging. But we are in a global business. We are in a business of entertaining people and providing content around the world in both the local language they speak, and in English, whether it's subtitled or dubbed. And so we're cognizant of making content for everybody. China is, without question, behind the US, the second largest theatrical market, or maybe the first. So we have to be aware of their tastes. And they've evolved quite rapidly. 5 years ago, you could put anything up you wanted, and if it was big and spectacle, you probably did okay. The audience is now very discerning. The first night you get a Maoyan and I think it's Duyan review, and if you didn't score right, your box office is curtailed. So they are very discerning in that market.
Elaine, any comments?
Yes, so we're not in China, which I believe is more of a remnant of our commerce business and the opportunities for Prime. So it's interesting. We're out of one of the biggest entertainment markets in the world. We are everywhere else. And India, I think these emerging markets, India is really, really interesting because of its rich history of Bollywood and local content creation, and a really rich local entertainment business and culture and affinity for content and everything else. What's interesting about the direct-to-consumer model in the emerging markets is the business models, because while they represent vast opportunity, it's a different willingness and ability to pay, and different technology as well. So we have a product in some markets that's a mobile first, mobile only, lower cost sort of entry product. And that's, I think, what's unique and interesting about some of the developing markets is finding, for direct to consumer businesses, is finding what's the business model that will work to satisfy what can be, in quantity of demand and numbers of potential customers, really great, but with very different sort of per subscriber economics, if you will. And then of course, the entertainment business, goes without saying, is a global business, and it's both exporting content globally and being cognizant of what some content and some genres exports better than others. And then two, when you're thinking about serving a global consumer base, making sure that we're delighting customers with the local content, local stories, local talent that will delight our international, global, local audiences.
Thank you. Going back to some of the questions that have been submitted, there's a couple related to the Paramount decree. The first one is, given the lifting of the Department of Justice's Paramount decree, which prohibits studios from owning movie theater chains, what is the likelihood of a major studio buying a movie theater chain? What studios might do this? John, do you have any thoughts on this?
I don't, but clearly, if a media company was looking to vertically integrate, that obviously is a form of vertical integration. The theater chains are obviously at a point of financial and economic weakness at the moment, as reflected in their stock price and their liquidity. So probably if somebody was looking to do that, this would probably be a less expensive time than otherwise, but I'm not sure I would expect to see that.
Josh, your thoughts?
I would agree. I don't think you're going to see the studios buying a movie theater chain. They're investing so much money right now in building out their direct-to-consumer experience that I think that would be off message for most of the studios right now.
Elaine?
I would concur.
Okay, another question. What's the future of VR and AR in the business?
Well, we created a really amazing VR movie with Alejandro Inarritu about immigration that actually won a honorary Academy Award. And so it was a terrific exercise. The problem right now with VR, at least, is that the installed user base is just not large enough to support the economics that you spend on creating the content. You could probably port, as people are doing, content over from games and have a VR game. But if you really want a VR experience like what we did, with Alejandro, you're talking about spending, 17 to $20 million on a production. And when you look at the installed user base and the uptake you would need, the economics just don't pencil. So until you have a larger installed user base, I think it's going to be more of a marketing novelty from a cinematic perspective. Clearly from gaming, it's a very valuable add-on channel. And we're actively involved in doing some AR and VR stuff as a add-on to some of the games we're making related to our movies and television shows. AR probably has a little bit better of a chance because it's a little more widely adopted, but I think there's a lot of runway we have left, for adoption before we really see this as a very viable new platform for entertainment.
Mark, I'd love to chime in on virtual production, and Josh probably may have some thoughts on this too. But a big interesting area for us is what we're calling a virtual studio, virtual production. And it was utilized, the technology was utilized, for example, in the production of The Mandalorian to create, and it's unbelievable what the technology can do. So it's this massive green screens that can create for the actor and ultimately the viewer the sense of being in a 3D complex world, but it's really produced in a green screen environment. And this can have a significant, it's expensive technology to get into, but once you get into it, you can imagine the savings. Instead of having to create, I'm going to make it up, some mega war scene in the mountains somewhere with thousands of actors and blah, 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 you can create that environment virtually and then have your lead talent doing that. And the thing that's super interesting about it is that from the talent's perspective, it's almost a 3D experience so that they feel like they're operating in a world of mountains and leagues of soldiers and whatever else. And that's interesting from a cost perspective. It's also super interesting from a location perspective. And 3, it's very interesting in a COVID world where doing scenes like that becomes so much more complex in COVID because of the risk and the testing and the protocols and everything else, that it also can help address some of our COVID production challenges.
Yeah, we actually did that. It's called volume stage, and using volume staging, it is right now very expensive, but it is a advancement when you have certain shots. We actually did it with Amazon on Carnival Row, where we did volume stage on some pickup shots instead of having to go back to Budapest, I think, or Prague, and it is expensive, but when you marry volume stage with things like LiDAR technology, where you don't have to film a city anymore, you just use the LiDAR digital renderings of it. The CG work, a little separate from VR, the CG work in production is making tremendous strides. Ultimately, we will have a lot of cost savings there. We haven't quite realized it yet, but as it becomes more commercial, it will hopefully bring down production costs.
Yeah, I would just add, I think technology, Mark, is continuing to evolve, and it's a journey, not a sprint. For those you mentioned, 5G should be an enabler for these because it's going to increase, the bandwidth and access. And there are, in the art of the possible, there are things around blockchain that can be good business models or big business systems or validation systems going forward. But so I think we should keep an eye on these, but I'm not sure they're on the 1-yard line.
Thank you. Elaine, there's a question for you about the kind of data that your company collects on consumers, and one issue about whether and why you don't disclose ratings. We've talked about this before when you come to class. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that before we close today.
Yeah, Well, in terms of data on consumers, of course, we operate well within the bounds of all privacy laws and things like that. So that's a very sensitive issue and important, and we are first and foremost focused on that, on protecting, all the privacy and that sort of thing of any consumer data. But we can certainly look at of course, you can look at the data of who's viewing and how long when are folks leaving a particular show, at what minute in an episode, at what episode. If content affinity clusters, folks who like this particular piece of content also are arrayed around X, Y, and Z, and that can help inform where we need to invest further and where we're adequately serving our customers. In terms of viewership and quote unquote ratings data, right now we see no particular, benefit to disclosing that, and there is a great benefit to knowing it and having that data internally. If you think about Nielsen data and the original need for it, it was for advertising. It's for an advertising-based model where the advertiser needed a third-party validator to say, yes, my Coca-Cola ad is going to reach XYZ people in XYZ demo, and so I'm willing to pay you what you said that I owe you for that. But there's no such need in our version of the streaming world. So we've been hesitant to externally feel any need to disclose that.
Thank you. Sujin, our time is just about up. So what I would like to do before we close is to thank Elaine, Josh, and John for an extremely informative panel discussion today. I hope to see you all in the future. Sujin, I'm going to turn it back to you. I don't know if you'd like to close.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists, and to Mark and John, Elaine, and Josh. Thank you so much for just participating in this discussion. And many of you have asked if this recording will be made available, which it will be on our Marshall website. And for all of you who have registered, we'll send a follow-up email as well. So thank you once again, and I will end the meeting now. Thank you.